Om Sadashivasamarambham Shankaracharya Madhyamam Asmadacharya Paryantam Vande Guru Paramparam. Oh my God, be seated, please. Yeah, please press a close-up. Yeah. Om Sahana Vavatu Sahano Bhunaktu Sahavidyan Karavavahai Tejasvinavadhitamastu ma vidvisha vahai. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Good. Welcome back. Welcome also to many students who are joining us online each week for these classes. We have come to the final portion of the Bhikshu Gita. So I won't recall the whole story. You've seen in the prior classes the story. And all of these classes are online. So if you miss a class, you can go back and catch up. So our enlightened bhikshu is a sannyasi, a Hindu monk, who is especially one who is wandering the countryside collecting food, alms, for the sake of his livelihood. So this bhikshu has gone from village to village to village, and usually when he enters a village, he's treated with respect, as monks generally are, Hindu monks, Buddhist monks, and others when they go out in various parts of Asia. But this bhikshu apparently came into a particular village where there was some kind of problem. And the problem, we don't know the details, but the people in that village mistreated this bhikshu very badly. Obviously, they didn't give him food, which is the reason he came into that village. But worse than that, they called him names, they cursed him, they took his staff and his water pot, and he was really verbally and even physically, I don't think he was hit, but having his possessions taken away from him. But very surprisingly, he didn't leave that village immediately. I'm sure eventually when he got hungry enough, he had to go on and find another village. But he wasn't driven out of the village by those villagers as you might think he would be, because he didn't feel threatened. And he didn't feel threatened because he was enlightened. He didn't see any problem. People were taking his staff and water pot. Okay. He didn't consider that a problem. People were cursing him. He didn't see that as being a problem. And he explains why he didn't look upon any of that as threatening. He explains why in the final few verses here. So we'll continue. And this is in the longer meter. Follow me, please. Deham mano matramimam grahitva Deham mano matramimam grahitva Mamahamit mamahamit manushyaha mamahamit manushyaha eshohamanyoyamiti brahmena eshohamanyoyamiti brahmena duranta pare tamasi brahmanti duranta pare tamasi paranti. Start in the second line at the end. Manushyaha. People. People in general, and people in this village in particular. People in this village who are andadhiyaha, whose minds are blind, stuck in darkness. It simply means ignorant. So the ignorant people, generally they think mama aham iti. Generally they think in terms of mama, mine, and aham, I. And especially with regard to the body. This is my body, not just my body, this is me. So there's identification with the body, which he describes in the first line. And these ignorant people, grahitva, having taken the body as having taken, actually the very first word, deham, having taken the body, mano matram imam deham, this body, having taken it, mano matram, merely through the mind, is indicating mental identification. So this body is not merely a thing, but this body is first my body, and secondly, it is me. Two levels of identification, me and mine. We've discussed this many times. You understand it well. So here's the problem. In this particular village, people thought in the third line, eshaha aham. Eshaha, this one, is aham. This one is me. Anyaha, the other, you can imagine in this village, they're pointing to this sadhu. Anyaha is anyaha ayam. Iti brahmena. They were brahmena due to this confusion. Eshaha aham, this is me, and ayam anyaha, and he is anyaha, other. In a prior class, I used that word othering. It's a huge social problem. When you make someone the other, different from you, that creates a division between you and them, and that division can give you permission to do harmful things. This othering, we talked about it quite a bit before. Let me give some different examples. I was young during the Vietnam War and very much involved in the protests back then. And it was very significant that soldiers fighting in Vietnam generally called the North Vietnamese, the guerrillas, they used the term Gook. They were called Gooks. The North Vietnamese soldiers were called Gooks. Why would they give them that name? Othering. You know, would you willingly take out a gun and fight against your own people? Unlikely. But would you be perhaps a little bit more willing to fight against Gooks? Othering. This othering, to treat another, again, we went through this so much, to treat another race or nationality or another religion or whatever it is, whatever divisions, these divisions we create, we can call them all instances of othering. And that's what's said here. This is Brahmena. This othering is an error of thinking. After all, no, we learned even during the war, many of us had the feeling that these North Vietnamese were fighting for their own country. And the presence of the United States was a leftover from the French colonialists who had ruled in Vietnam for many years. If you look at the history of the Vietnam War, long, like anything, long and complicated, but clearly the United States had no ethical reason to be there fighting against the North Vietnamese. There was a reason, just wasn't ethical. The reason was due to the Cold War. The government had decided that that communism, what do they call it? The creeping communism was the term used in the late 50s and 1960s. They had to stop communism from creeping elsewhere. So there was so much fear during that Cold War. That was the reason. Is that a rational reason or perhaps a somewhat irrational reason? I'll leave you to make up your own minds about it. But anyway, for that reason, the North Vietnamese were othered, and having othered them, they became subject to violence. Where else does that happen? Everywhere. Is that happening today in Gaza? Is that happening today in Sudan? Is it happening today in Ukraine? And and those are major wars. There are so many other places where it's going on in less obvious ways, and to say the obvious, including in this country, where the conservatives other the progressives, and progressives other the conservatives. And the problem, of course, is once you other the other group, violence ensues. In this case, verbal violence. Thank goodness, we don't see riots on our street, but the verbal violence, on social media, it's awful. That's violence. That's himsa. So that himsa arises because of this othering. Now, the sadhu encountered this othering in that village, and look at his response to it. First of all, as I said, they didn't scare him out of the village because he was enlightened, he didn't feel threatened. And his conclusion he gives in his last line. Those people of the village, the andadhyaha, the people who were living in ignorance, they brahmanti, they wandered in tamasi, in tapas, darkness, ignorance. What kind of ignorance? Duranta pare, an ignorance that is exceedingly difficult to come out of. That's an interesting term he uses, duranta pare, that which you can't cross over, that which you can't come out of. And the reason you can't come out of this particular ignorance is it's programmed generally, and this is a social problem we're talking about, and as I said in an earlier class, what we're discussing now is a social dimension to non-duality. We'll come to that in just a moment. So here, this othering is an instance of duality, creating divisions. So he observes that those who other others, does that make sense? Those who other, the other people who other the others, will make a mess out of it. What do? Brahma, tamasi, brahmanti, they wander in the darkness of ignorance, and his adjective really sticks out for me. Duranta pare. Generally, ignorance is not so easy to come out, not so difficult to come out of. Suppose you have to learn a new skill. Suppose a new computer application. Many of you have dealt with that. You've never used this program before, and it's a little intimidating at first, but then you sit down, and of course, one thing you don't do is read the manual. No one reads the manual. But fortunately, they embed some help files in the program, and you gradually figure out a good way. Sometimes you go to YouTube and watch a tutorial. Good. The point is, it's not that hard to come out of that kind of ignorance. This ignorance, however, durantapara, is extraordinarily difficult to come out of. Why? Think about this problem of othering. The people of this village, I mentioned before, it looks to me, we don't know, and the commentator doesn't say anything about it, but it looks to me like there was perhaps an ethnic difference between the sadhu and the people of this village. Some kind of significant difference that led him to be othered. Or maybe it was a religious difference. Maybe it. Of course, back in those days, were there any Christian villages in India? Not a one. So this is pre-Christian times. Even in an Islamic village, this is early enough that it couldn't have been a religious difference. I don't know. We don't. Maybe. I have no idea. I would guess an ethnic difference. So because of the ethnic difference, or maybe a difference of skin color, this sadhu was very badly treated. Now look, that discrimination against different ethnicities or different races or different skin colors is a form of ignorance. Is that kind of ignorance as easy to come out of as the ignorance of the computer application that you were learning for the first time? In a matter of days, you were able to use that computer program. How about coming out of this othering? And this country is a great example. In the 1950s and 1960s, there was tremendous strife in this country. You all know the story. The blacks who had been discriminated against so much in this country and then finally there were laws passed making discrimination illegal in the 1960s. Tell me, when discrimination was made illegal in this country, did it stop? No way. It's gradually becoming less, thank goodness, but it continues even today, decades and decades after that. So why? And you can figure out where this is going. If you are raised in a family that holds on to these old-fashioned ideas, these discriminating ideas, if your parents are like that, what do you pick up as you grow up? Exactly. Or the community in which you're raised. This kind of discrimination leading to this othering is programmed into us from birth onwards, depending on our parents, our local community, the society in which we're raised. Is that easy to get rid of? Not at all. And in this country, it's a good example. It's taking generations to come out of it. Or to give a good Indian example, the animosity between Indians and Pakistanis, largely due to the horrors of partition. In partition, several million people were killed. And Muslims killed Hindus, Hindus killed Muslims, Sikhs killed Muslims, Muslims killed Sikhs. Think of the animosity present in that generation. Now, those of you raised in India, you're 2 generations later, but you've noticed that animosity is not completely gone yet, is it? It's less, just like discrimination against blacks is less here. So that's what this durantapara expression means. This kind of ignorance leading to othering is very deeply embedded and very hard to overcome. So here, actually, let's just go on. You'll see something. We'll just see in the next verse. Let the bhikshu explain it. Why should I? What do they say? Why should I? That's right. Why should I steal his thunder? That's the expression used, right? So we'll see how he says it. Na kena chit kwapi katanchanasya, na kena chit kwapi katanchanasya, dvandvo paraga paratah parasya, dvandvo paraga paratah parasya, yatahama samsriti rupina syat, yatahama samsriti rupina syat, evam prabuddho na bibheti bhutaihi, evam prabuddho na bibheti bhutaihi. Start in the 3rd line. Yatha, just as, ahamaha samsriti rupinaha syat, just like for those villagers who had that thinking, aham, this is me, this is mine, and you are not like me. So this is actually given as a counter example here. So it's a drishtanta, but a counter example. So I would say unlike that samsriti rupinaha, unlike those who are in that ignorant village, who ahamaha, who have that idea I is different, you are other than I, you are a different group. What about them? In the 2nd line, they are dvandva uparagaha. They are uparagaha, they are affected by dvandva, by these differences, by bheda. The difference between us and them, me and other. So they are affected by this othering. The othering due to parataha, due to another one who is outside of our group. So these people who, due to ignorance in this village, they are overcome by this divisiveness. This is a good word here, divisiveness. But, and this is where Vedanta walks in the door, so to speak, but parasya, so in the drishtanta, he's giving the example of the people in the village. In the darshtanta, he's giving the example of Atma, one's true nature. Or one who has discovered one's true nature to be Satchidananda Atma. And just to point out the obvious, what is the race or nationality of Satchidananda Atma? What is the skin color? What is the religion? Don't you dare say Hindu. You get my point. So Satchidananda Atma has none of these superficial qualities. Parasya, for that essence of who you are, there is absolutely na dvandva uparagaha, bringing down that first line. There is absolutely no being affected by differences. What difference does it make? Let's make it very clear. Bias belongs to your mind. clearly. Racial bias, whatever it is, bias belongs to your mind. Does bias belong to consciousness? In fact, consciousness is that which allows you to recognize your biases. Biases are known to you. Biases belong to the mind. Consciousness is not biased in any way. As we said, has no qualities like the mind has. So for para, for Satchidananda Atma, or for one who has realized I am that pure consciousness, for such a person, na dvandva uparagaha, there is no division according to this beta, these differences, these social differences, etc. Na kenachit, not due to anything, na kwapi, nor in any place, na katanchana, nor in any manner, asya parasya, with regard to Atma. Atma, Satchidananda Atma, consciousness, makes no differentiation whatsoever. All of these biases and problems occur in our minds, and they occur due to ignorance. So therefore, then the sadhu concludes, evam, in the last line, thus, prabuddhaha, an enlightened person, na bibheti, does not experience fear, bhutaihi, due to other people. No fear due to other people because there's no division, there's no othering, there's nothing to be afraid of. The nice observation to make here is this sadhu is expressing the highest teaching of Advaita Vedanta, which is non-duality. But notice the context. Generally, when non-duality is taught in the sense of Brahman being the underlying reality because of which everything exists. Is that our context? I thought we were talking about ignorant villagers. We're talking about ignorant villagers here. So this discussion here about not making divisions, advaita, no division, no difference. This discussion about not making divisions is not an expression of this profound Vedantic teaching of non-duality. It's not a philosophical teaching. It is a social dimension to Advaita. And this is not much discussed. I'm just delighted to see it like sticks out of this text. To have Advaita Vedanta discuss the merits of realization of non-duality is discussed here from the standpoint of social problems. So here, of course, the Bhagavad Gita and other texts do indeed talk about social problems, but I've never seen anywhere else this social problem of othering, divisiveness, bias, racism, sexism. Sexism. Decades ago, there was so much more discrimination against women. And is it gone? Do women earn as much as men in this country? You've all read those statistics. So it's not gone, it's on its way out. But this is the problem of othering, directly addressed by the sadhu who was, can't say he was the victim of othering because it didn't affect him. He didn't run away. He wasn't threatened by any of that. But what a powerful message. So many people will complain that very heavy spirituality of Advaita Vedanta, what relevance does it have to day-to-day life? What did we just read? This problem, the problems of racism, of sexism, of all of this divisiveness, it can all be traced to ignorance. And Vedanta directly addresses the ignorance that is the basis for all of these social problems. Usually, how do we address social problems? How did the United States address the social problem of racism? Pass a law. After all, what else can they do? So they pass a law. Passing the law doesn't solve the problem, but it puts the country in a certain direction where each successive generation will have less racism. So how can we solve the problem of racism, of sexism, of all of these problems? We can pass laws. Good. And those laws don't immediately solve the problem. It takes generations. But when you remove ignorance in such a way that you see all human beings are identical in essence. That's what Advaita Vedanta teaches. That's what the sadhu is referring to. Once you get it, that all human beings are identical in essence, then it becomes impossible to discriminate against anyone with that recognition. Tell me, does that take generations to get that knowledge? Like we said with the computer, you get that knowledge quickly. It takes generations for a law to change a society. But for you as an individual to discover and recognize the essential identity of all people, the oneness of all people, then you get it now. Doesn't take generations. Okay. So, our bhikshu concludes his Bhikshu Gita with this next verse. Etam sa asthaya paratmanishtam. Etam sa asthaya paratmanishtam. Adhyasitam purvatamayr maharshibihi. Adhyasitam purvatar maharshibihi aham tarishyami durantaparam. Aham tarishyami durantaparam. Tamo mukundangri nishevayaiva. Tamo mukundangri nishaiva eva. Saha, aham, I, the bhikshu is speaking here. I, because I am asthaya, because I am established, etam paramatma nishtam, because I am established in this vision, in this spiritual wisdom of recognizing the essence of all people as being one. The term used here, Paramatma. If we can say that there is one Paramatma, one God, so to speak, one essence that gives existence and reality to all people. It is identical in all, regardless of race, ethnicity, religion, etc. So he says, since I am established in that vision of oneness of the true self of every person, I am established in what? I am established in that which is adhyasitam, that in which, and we have to get the subject here, purvaihi, the earlier ones. Who were the earlier ones? Maharshibihi, the great sages. All of the great sages who lived long ago, they were adhyasitam. They were also established in this truth, in this vision of the sameness of the essence of all people. He says, since I am established in that same vision of oneness as the ancient rishis were, therefore, aham in the third line, aham tarishyami. I can easily cross duranta param tamaha. I can easily cross this tamas, this darkness. Duranta param, even though it is difficult for others to cross, he says, tarishyami, I'll cross it, no problem. Others consider it difficult to cross. We gave the example, the reasoning, right? If you're raised in that family, very difficult to come out of. Take someone from that family. Suppose someone was raised in, we'll just make this a little realistic, raised in Alabama. Now, by the way, if you're raised in Alabama, please don't, I don't mean to criticize, but Alabama in this country is kind of well known for some people who are racist to this day. Suppose you were born in a racist family in Alabama and were a dedicated student of Advaita Vedanta studying this Bhikshu Gita. What do you think might happen to your racism? Even though you were born in that racist family, these teachings are powerful enough to help you come out of that programming you had as a child. So in spite of the fact it is duranta param, difficult to come out of, these teachings are so powerful that with these teachings you can definitely destroy that ignorance and see the fundamental sameness of all people. And how did the bhikshu do it? He said he gives in one long compound word. He says, how did he do it? Mukunda angri nishevaya. He said, by nishevaya, worshiping, or better yet, resorting to the angri, the feet, the legs of Mukunda Sri Krishna. Remember, this is a text which is focused largely on Vishnu and Sri Krishna. So we get this reference here by surrendering to the feet of Lord Krishna. He says that he's come out of this problem of divisiveness, the problem of othering, this particular ignorance. Now, it's a funny expression, and by the way, this is how he concludes his Bhikshu Gita. He concludes it with these words, and it may seem like an odd way to express his realization unless we add a little commentary here. So he says, by resorting to the feet of Sri Krishna. If you get it, that Sri Krishna is a reality because of which everyone exists, then these feet, I'm talking about my own feet, I don't think they can see them on camera. I don't know if I don't think I can raise them high enough. Anyway, you can assume I have feet. And they're down here someplace. Our local students can see them very nicely. They're in orange socks today. Anyway, here's the point. If you really get these teachings, Lord Krishna's feet are over there on the altar. Lord Krishna's feet are stuck at the end of my ankles. Lord Krishna's feet are at the end of your legs. All feet are Sri Krishna's feet. This is a metaphor. What a lovely metaphor. So when he says, by resorting to Lord Krishna's feet means your feet, my feet, even the feet of these villagers who abused him so badly. He held no ill will towards them whatsoever. How could he? He recognized the people in this village were just as divine as the people of that village who fed me all kinds of delicacies, gave me a soft bed to sleep on, and spent hours listening to my discourses. He's not, that divisiveness of thinking is gone. That ignorance is removed. So very nice. This is an expression called para bhakti. Bhakti, you understand very well, when you take bhakti to the next level. At the lower level, bhakti means devotion to Sri Krishna's feet. At the higher level, all feet are Sri Krishna's feet. That is para bhakti. So with that, our Bhikshu concludes his Bhikshu Gita, and then Sri Krishna concludes the chapter with a few verses. Shri Bhagavanu Vacha, Shri Bhagavanu Vacha, Nirvidya Nashta Dravino Gata Klamaha, Nirvidya Nashta Dravino Gata Klamaha, Pravrajyagam Paryata Manayitam, Pravajragam Paryata Manahitam, Nirakrito Sadbhirapi Swadharmat, Nirakrito Sadbhirapi Swadharmat, Akampito Mum Muni. Akampito mum munirahagatam, akampito mum munirahagatam. All right. So now Sri Krishna is narrating all of this, of course, to Uddhava, and he talks about this bhikshu in the end of the first line as being gata klamaha. Remember how depressed he was? No more. Gata klama, he's no longer depressed. He is still nashta dravaha. He has lost all his wealth. He never regained his wealth, right? He had accumulated so much, he never regained it, but nirvidya, he doesn't care. He is detached from all the wealth that he once gained. And what is he doing? He is pravrajya. I have a hard time pronouncing that for some reason. Pravrajyagam. Wandering the world, wandering the earth. Paryatamanaha. Going from place to place. Itam, in this way. In this way means what? He's going for alms, and he has this vision of oneness wherever he goes. So whether he's treated well or whether he's abused, he has equanimity. We had in an earlier class, we called it titiksha. Called this one, titiksha means forbearance or equanimity. We can call his titiksha, to use a common American expression, titiksha on steroids. I mean, just amazing forbearance he had. And nirakrataha asadbihi api, even though he was nirakrataha, he was cursed, he was insulted, asadbihi, by these ignorant people, even though he was insulted by them, swadharmat akampitaha amum. He was akampitaha, he didn't waver, swadharmat, from his swadharma. And what was his swadharma? I mentioned when we discussed that he took sannyasa. He became a Hindu monk. There are two main vows every Hindu monk makes. One is a vow of renunciation. That's the main vow. Anything that doesn't contribute to spiritual growth is given up, which means anything that contributes to spiritual growth need not be given up. Can be given up, but definitely anything that opposes spiritual growth is given up. The second vow, which is a significant one here, is the vow of ahimsa. Sarva bhutebhyaha abhayam astu. Let there be no fear from me for any creature whatsoever. So in the village, when all those people were abusing him, did he retaliate? Did he give him what's wrong with you? Verbal retaliation. What's wrong with you people? He didn't even do that, because that would have been hurtful to them. If you find a racist person and you say, you're a racist, that's hurtful. They don't think they're racist. They think that they just see the world like that. When you call that person a racist, they get hurt. So this sadhu didn't retaliate. He was fixed on his swadharma, and Munihi, that wise one, he said Gatam, this song, this poetic teaching that we've just concluded. Then, Sri Krishna is starting to wind up. Oh, we're back to the shorter meter now. Sukha dukkha prado nanyaha, sukha dukkha prado nanyaha, purushasya-atma vibhramaha, purushasya-atma vibhramaha, mitro dasina ripavaha, mitro dasina ripavaha, samsarasthamasa kritaha, samsarasthamasa kritaha. In the second line, purushasya, for a person, for any person, for all people. Here Sri Krishna is summarizing the teachings found in the Bhikshu Gita. He says, for all people, first line, sukha dukkha pradaha, that which prada, gives, that which causes sukha and dukkha, the source of happiness and suffering, the source, purushasya, for all people, the source of happiness and suffering is where? And this is we've had this discussion in so many ways. The source of happiness is not going on a holiday. The source of happiness is not your favorite food. The source of suffering is not your angry boss or your difficult mother-in-law. The source of happiness and suffering is what? Atma vibhramaha, in the second line. Here, Atma means mind. The vibhrama, confusion in your mind. Not understanding correctly, simply put, ignorance is the cause. So going on a holiday, you think it's a source of happiness until you go on a holiday and you're miserable because everything goes wrong, and you pay thousands of dollars to suffer through all of that. Does that sound like a holiday you might have had at one point? It happens. The point is that holiday or anything desirable is not the source of happiness, nor are the people who mistreat you the source of suffering. Our sadhu was, let's take it from the standpoint of the sadhu. When he went to a village and he was honored, was that a source of happiness for him? Not for him. Somebody else, if you went into a village and they washed your feet and then they fed you all this fine food and then they gave you a nice, you might think that you were being honored. He didn't think that at all. After all, all of those honors were given for this body, and he was not identified with the body. So he didn't feel honored when he went into some villages. And when he went into this particular village where he was othered and he was mistreated so badly, he didn't feel hurt. So sukha and dukkha are not due to external influences. And this is where spiritual life begins. with the recognition that the true source of happiness and suffering is, and the word, it's in your mind, but what he says here, Atma Vibhramaha, confusion in your mind, ignorance in your mind, na anyaha, and not otherwise. It is not the vacation that's the source of happiness. It is not the angry boss that is the source of suffering. The source of suffering is confusion in your mind, ignorance, and therefore, talking about that ignorance, go down to the last line. Tamasaha kritaha, that which is krita, created by this tamas, by this ignorance, that which is created by this ignorance, samsara, this worldly life, created by this ignorance, this worldly life consists of, and here we're back to that social dimension of non-duality, where he says, ignorance causes this division between mitra, friend, udasina, someone who is neither a friend or an enemy. What do they say? He was sitting on the fence. How's that? Udasina and ripu, enemy, clearly an enemy. So ripavaha, plural. So this division, and does it happen generally for people? In your mind, certain people are mitra, friends. Certain people are ripu, enemies. Admit it. And other people don't fall in either category, they're udasina. But the fact that in your mind, perhaps, let me soften that, perhaps in your mind, a certain person you look upon as ripu. You have othered that person. Yes, that person has abused you. I don't doubt it. You don't think of that person as ripu for no reason at all. You have more than enough reasons. But those reasons are not the bhikshu's reasons. Which means, if you shift your perspective away from what that person did to you, the person that you look upon as an enemy, instead of focusing on what that person did to you, suppose you appreciate that that person is struggling in this world for happiness just like you. Is it not true? The person who hurt you so badly, do you think they've ever suffered in their lives? They've had a lot of problems? Just like you? Ultimately, there's only superficial differences between you and the person you consider an enemy, but fundamentally, you and your enemy are alike. We said before, our similarities are far, far more than our differences. So when you go through these teachings of our bhikshu and see the essential oneness of all people, then this othering goes away, this categorization, friend, fence-sitter, and enemy. And that, as we said earlier, that categorization tears apart societies. So here's our societal dimension to the teachings of Advaita Vedanta. And Sri Krishna concludes the chapter. Tasmat sarvatmana tata, tasmat sarvatmana tata, nigrihana manodhiya, nigrihana manodhiya, maya veshitaya yukta maya veshitaya yukta etavan yoga sangraha etavan yoga sangraha. End of the first line, Tata, O dear one. Sri Krishna is addressing his cousin, Uddhava. He says, O dear Uddhava, tasmat, therefore. Now he's going to, I don't think Sri Krishna is going to teach like this, but this is kind of his conclusive teaching. Therefore, O Uddhava, sarvatmana, with all your strength, with your whole heart. And here again, Atma cannot mean Satchidananda Atma. So you translate with your whole heart, with all your effort. Nigrahana, you should control manas, you should control your mind. How? Diya, with your intellect, with wisdom, with knowledge. So if ignorance is a problem whose locus is the mind, in the mind, the problem of ignorance gets resolved. Of course, not on its own. We require some help. And in this Uddhava Gita, we're getting so much help. And through removing that ignorance, he tells Uddhava, you should be yuktaha. You should be engaged. Mayi aveshitaya. You should be not engaged, connected, absorbed, that's good. You should be absorbed, aveshitaya, being absorbed, mayi, in me. You should be connected to me, you should be absorbed in me. Remember the prior verse about the bhikshu surrendering to Lord Krishna's feet? And here the sense is, not to be absorbed in Sri Krishna as an individual deity, as an avatara, as a deity on the altar, but the truth of Sri Krishna, who is manifest as all of us. You should be absorbed in me. Let me add some words on here. O Uddhava, dear Uddhava, you should remove the ignorance in your mind and be absorbed in me, the one who is the essence of all people. I am the essence of all people. Etavan, this much, yoga sangraha. This is the sangraha. This is the summary, the essence of yoga, of the teachings of yoga. This is the essential teaching of yoga. And you've heard it said many times that yoga can come from a root yuj, meaning to connect, to join. And to join what? Sri Krishna makes it very clear. Where should you absorb your mind? Let's just go way back just a minute or two before we conclude our class. Look at our bhikshu. When he was still a miserly brahmana living in Avanti, where was his mind? Money, 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 money. That's where his mind was. Not unusual. You know people like that. So at first, his mind was absorbed in money. Then, when everyone turned on, because he was miserly, right? His family turned on him, his colleagues turned on him, everyone turned on him. So he ended up being a grumpy old loner, and he became very depressed. So now he is no longer money, money, money. Now he's thinking, oh me, oh my, how miserable I am. So now his mind is absorbed in his own depression. So look at that. Previously, he was in better shape before when his mind was absorbed in money. Then his mind is absorbed in depression. But finally, his mind was absorbed in Sri Krishna. Yes. at Sri Krishna's feet, so to speak, and that is Sri Krishna's message as he concludes this chapter is, where should our minds find absorption, find peace, find comfort, find happiness and joy? In Sri Krishna manifest here, Sri Krishna present within you as your true nature. Lovely way to conclude the chapter. When we meet next week, we'll go to the next chapter of the Uddhava Gita. Quick announcements here. Tomorrow we have our Vedanta class. We've just started a new chapter of Upadesha Sahasri. Really good time to join or rejoin the class tomorrow at 10 o'clock. Come and join us. And of course, the class is followed by Satsanga. Also, there's a project coming up that perhaps someone here might be able to help with. A project of preparing a new text, a little bit more complicated, this one. If you are, first of all, if you know Sanskrit, if you can read Sanskrit, if you also know how to take Sanskrit and transliterate it properly using Roman letters, following the standard IAST transliteration. If you're comfortable on a computer using PowerPoint and using fonts, and if you want to undertake a project, we'll start small and then it will be for a future text. If you'd like to volunteer for that project, you can send me an email. And we'll conclude with our prayers. Om Gananahan Tva Ganapatigam Avamahe Kaving Gavidam Upamashravastamam Jeshtarajam Brahmanam Brahmanaspataha Nashranvan Uttabasira Saranam Om Mahaganapataye Namaha Ishvaro Gurudhatmeti Murti Bheda Vibhagine Vyomavad Vyapta Dehaya Dakshina Murtaye Namaha Vasudeva Sutam Devam Kamsachanuramardanam Devaki Paramanandam Krishnam Vande Jagadguru. Om Sarve Bhavantu Sukhinaha Sarve Santu Niramayaha Sarve Bhadrani Pashyantu Ma Kaschad Dukkha Bhag Bhavet Asato Ma Satgamaya Tamaso Ma Jyotirgamaya Mrityorma Amritam Gamaya. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Om Tat Sat.